Shalom, WJC family. Time for our weekly Torah Talk. Excited to be giving this talk on day 37, Thursday, of the counting of the Omer. So I've had my Lag BaOmer haircut and beard trim, which always feels great. And we've moved towards a more joyful stance. The beginning of the Omer count up until Lag BaOmer is kind of somber. So we march from the Passover holiday, the Exodus, off into the desert. Now, as we near Shavuot and the revelation of Torah at Sinai, it turns more joyful. And so we stop doing the morning customs like shaving, or like refraining from shaving and haircuts. And that connection to Torah is perfect for Parshat Behukkotai and that joy of Torah, although it might not sound joyful at first. Bear with me and I'll explain. Behukkotai is all about blessings and curses. It opens up, if you do as I say, all these good things are going to happen. And if you don't do as I say, God tells the people, if you don't follow my mitzvot, if you don't follow my chukim, my chukot, my difficult to understand rules, the rules that the explanations are not obvious, right? Don't steal is a mishpat, it's obvious. Keep kosher is a chok. We don't know exactly why God is concerned with what we eat. If you don't do those things, you will get curses, and the curses are terrible: starvation and famine, and being overtaken by enemies, and the land rejecting us, and just terrible results. So how is this joyful, right? Well, this is actually the backbone of Torah, this idea, but it makes us bristle, right? We don't like the idea that there's a reward and punishment structure. And the reason we don't like it is because we don't see that kind of justice in the world every day, right? We often see good things happening to those who do evil, who don't follow the values of the Torah and the ethics of normative humanity. And we see bad things happening, awful things happening to those who are righteous, those who are good, who follow the values of the Torah, who are good members of the human race. So what does this mean? If we don't believe this as reward and punishment, what does it mean? Well, some of you may know, many years ago, I worked in a preschool. My undergraduate degree is in child development and child care. And it was the 90s, and it was very popular. We didn't talk about punishing kids. We talked about kids having consequences. Oh, if you do that, there's going to be consequences. It always bothered me. And it bothered me because punishment and consequences are not the same thing. Right? A punishment is something unrelated to the action that is imposed to teach a lesson by an authority figure. Right? So break the rules of Torah and God will punish you. Right? What does that mean? That means if you don't grow the food the way that it's meant to be grown, there may be a punishment. And that punishment might be that enemies will conquer you. It has nothing to do with the growing of food. However, there could also be consequences, right? Meaning that if you don't follow the agricultural rules, God is advising that the food just won't grow. There'll be starvation and famine because you're mistreating the land. Those are consequences, the natural results of your actions. And I think this idea, which is so popular in Deuteronomy, which is so popular in the Torah, and which appears here at the end of the book of Leviticus in this final Torah portion, Behukkotai, is not so much about reward and punishment, but as I learned many years ago from teachers of mine like Rabbi Brad Artson and Rabbi Harold Kushner, with whom I was privileged to learn, this is not so much about reward and punishment. This is about actions and consequences. What God is saying in passages like this, or even a passage like the Shema, that seems even more to be about reward and punishment. That middle section of the Shema, V'haya im Shemoah, which says, if you do as I say, it's going to rain. And if you don't, there'll be no rain and your food won't grow. Sounds like a reward, and punishment, because what does one have to do with the other? But in fact, my teachers taught that all of these things can be and should be interpreted as consequences, right? Natural consequences. What God is saying here is, Im Behukkotai telechu, right? If in my mysterious rules that you can't rationalize, it's an interesting verb, telechu, you walk, right? This is halacha. This is how we live our lives. And God is saying, sometimes, even if you don't understand it, you have to accept that the Torah has wisdom and God has wisdom to bring into our lives, to influence who we are and what we do. And if we follow that path, if we make halacha part of our life, even when we don't totally understand it. And think of a parent, right? Sometimes a parent gives advice, we don't understand it as children. Those are these hukotai, these my rules. Viet mitzvotai tishmoru, and my mitzvot you guard or you keep, you protect them wherever you are, whatever you're doing. You make mitzvot part of your lives. Ve'asitem otam, and do them. It's not enough to learn them. It's not enough just to have these ideas floating around in your head, but then go do whatever you want. But you have to do them. You have to make them part of your life, not only in thought, but also in action. When you do those three things, accept rules even when we don't totally understand them, keep mitzvot, guard the mitzvot, and make sure we do them as part of our lives, the natural consequences God is telling us is that our lives will be better. We will feel blessed. We will feel like we have plenty. We will feel like our enemies cannot affect us. We will feel this sense of closeness and connection to God. When we do not do those things, ultimately, life is going to go off the rails, or it's going to feel like it's going off the rails. Nothing will be good enough. We'll never feel like we have enough. Enemies will be able to conquer us. Our children will leave us, and the family structure, our connections to our family, will fall apart, and so on and so forth. All the terrible things that are in the curses, not as a punishment, but as a natural consequence of leaving the values of Torah, the values of Judaism, the values of family, of tikkun olam, of trying to keep God close to us in our lives. When we don't do them, we won't feel God close. We won't feel those good things. Nothing will ever be enough. And so this is not so much a passage, or I think it's at least more, it makes more sense based on the world we live in, not to read these passages as being passages about reward and punishment, but rather they are about how we live our lives and the natural consequences. And I remember Rabbi Arnowitz once teaching that mitzvot, we always translate as commandment, that's what it means in Hebrew, but that there was an Aramaic connection to it that meant more connection. And that when we think of the mitzvot that way, of guarding the mitzvot that way, each mitzvah is an opportunity to connect with God. In the same way that when our parents give us advice, every time they do so, we have a chance to connect with our parents by following that advice, or to not do so, which may create some distance with our parents. And that's okay. That's part of, childhood and adolescence and adulthood, is making our own decisions. But when we follow the path our parents lay for us, we feel closer. So too with God, when we follow Torah, we feel closer. We have those opportunities for connection in the mitzvot. When we make that halacha, the way we live our lives, the way we walk down the path, holech is from walking, then even when we do that with rules we don't understand, the chukim, then we will then ultimately we will feel that sense of closeness, that sense of connection. The consequences we will feel spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, like we are living a better life. And Torah is giving us that opportunity, right? The mitzvot are that opportunity. Not to enter into some kind of primitive reward and punishment deal that we know doesn't seem to play out in life, but to enter into a practice and consequence, to know that the opportunity is there for us to have a sense of God in our lives, to feel the closeness of that spirit, to have a life that is filled with blessings, even when it's hard. That is the ultimate reward, so to speak, or consequence of taking these rules and bringing them into our lives. And what a beautiful opportunity it is to have, to connect with God, to connect with Spirit, to enrich our lives, whatever is going on, by accepting upon us this wisdom of Torah, the values of Torah, and the practices of our faith that we've been refining for thousands of years to help us get close to God again, to help us feel that sense of standing at Sinai once more, as we will celebrate in a couple of weeks on Shavuot. I pray that we all are able to find our way to take advantage meaningfully and have the consequences of blessing in our lives that our Torah portion, Behukkotai, explains. And that ultimately, on this Shabbat and every Shabbat, we're able to embrace that spirit and feel that closeness in our lives. Shabbat Shalom.